Liam Sterling looked at the woman he was supposed to marry, the woman for whom he had curated a life of careful, calculated mediocrity, and he prepared to set the world on fire. He let his shoulders slump, cultivating an air of utter defeat he had practiced in the mirror that morning. He scrubbed a hand over his face, a gesture of exhausted despair. The expensive, minimalist living room of their shared apartment, a space Chloe had designed with aggressive precision, suddenly felt like a cage. "Chloe," he began, his voice a low, gravelly thing he'd roughened with deliberate dehydration. "We need to talk." Chloe looked up from her phone, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows arching in a delicate expression of annoyance. She was scrolling through images of Venetian wedding venues, each one more opulent than the last. "Liam, not now. I'm trying to decide between the Palazzo Cavalli Franchetti and the Aman. The lighting at the Aman is better for photos, but the history of the Palazzo is just everything." He didn't look at the tablet, he looked at her. He had loved this woman, or at least he had loved the idea of her. The beautiful, vibrant, ambitious woman he'd met at a gallery opening 2 years ago. But the idea and the reality had long since diverged, and now only a painful, hollow space remained between them. "The venues don't matter anymore," he said, letting the words hang in the air, heavy and dead. He watched her face, the clinical observation of a scientist studying a specimen. The annoyance flickered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then impatience. "What are you talking about? Of course they matter. The Vanderbilts do not have lackluster weddings." She said the Vanderbilts, as if it were a royal dynasty, not a family with a moderately successful import-export business propped up by debt and social climbing. "I had a call this morning," Liam continued, ignoring her protest. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the city, a view he had paid for, but for which she had taken credit. He presented his back to her, a posture of shame. "The final appeal for the waterfront project. We lost it. The firm is downsizing. My entire team is being let go, including me." This part was a lie, a carefully constructed fiction built on a grain of truth he had manufactured himself. There was a silence. It was not a silence of sympathy. It was a silence of rapid, cold calculation. He could feel it radiating from her, a palpable drop in the room's temperature. He turned back to face her. "And the investments? The ones I made to try and build a cushion for us? They were tied to the project's success. It was high risk, high reward." He let out a shaky, false breath. "It's all gone, Chloe." He delivered the final, fatal line. "We lost everything." He watched her face. For a fleeting, desperate second, he hoped for a different reaction. He hoped for a flash of concern for him, for a hand reached out, for the words, "We'll get through this." He hoped to be proven wrong. He was not. Chloe's immaculately made-up face did not crumble in sadness. It hardened into a mask of cold fury. The soft, romantic glow she reserved for her social media followers vanished, replaced by the sharp, predatory focus of a hawk spotting a dying field mouse. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, narrowed. Her lips, usually curved in a placid smile, thinned into a bloodless line. She didn't see a partner in pain. She saw a bad investment, a liability. "Everything?" she repeated, the word a shard of ice. "What do you mean, everything?" "The savings, the down payment for the house. It's all gone," he lied, tasting ash in his mouth. The lie was ugly, but the truth it was designed to reveal was far uglier. She stood up. The movement was fluid, decisive. There was no hesitation. She didn't walk toward him to offer comfort. She walked toward their bedroom. "You idiot," she hissed, the words low and venomous. "You absolute sentimental idiot. High risk? With my future? With the wedding 6 months away?" He stood perfectly still, a statue of feigned brokenness, as he heard the sounds from the bedroom. The sharp zip of a suitcase, the clatter of hangers being pulled from the closet, the slide of drawers being opened and slammed shut. She was packing. She was packing her bags before he had even finished talking, before the echo of his fabricated ruin had fully faded from the air. The test was over. The results were in, and they were more damning than he could have ever imagined. He had thought it would take her a day, maybe two, to disentangle herself. He had underestimated her ruthlessness. She emerged minutes later, dragging a sleek silver Remova suitcase behind her. She had already changed out of her casual lounge set into sharp jeans, a black cashmere sweater, and boots. She looked like she was heading to an airport, not leaving the wreckage of a life. She didn't look at him. She looked past him, as if he were a piece of furniture she no longer had any use for. "My mother was right about you," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion except a chilling contempt. "She said you were a pretender. All talk, no substance. A nice, safe, boring little architect who would never amount to anything. I thought I could mold you. I thought you had potential." She scoffed, a dry, brittle sound. What a waste of 2 years. She pulled her phone out, her thumb moving with practiced speed. "I'll have a car here in 5 minutes. I'll send someone for the rest of my things tomorrow." He finally spoke, his voice quiet, a stark contrast to her clipped fury. "Chloe, is that it? No questions? No, what can we do?" She finally met his eyes, and what he saw there confirmed everything. There was nothing. No love. No sorrow. Only the cold, hard glint of self-preservation. "Do?" She laughed, a humorless, ugly sound. "What is there to do? You've done it. You've failed. The only thing left for me to do is to cut my losses." He watched as she walked to the door, her posture ramrod straight, her head held high. She did not look back. The door clicked shut behind her, the sound as final as a gavel. Liam stood alone in the silent, cavernous apartment. He did not feel sadness. He did not feel heartbreak. He felt a profound, cleansing, and terrifying clarity. He walked over to his briefcase, which sat by the sofa. He opened it and took out a simple, black moleskin notebook. Its edges were slightly worn, its cover soft with use. To anyone else, it was just a notebook. To him, it was everything. He opened it to a fresh page, and with a steady hand, he wrote today's date. Below it, he wrote a single sentence. The test was a success. Then he closed the notebook, his heart beating a slow, steady, and resolute rhythm. The pretending was over. It was time to show the Vanderbilts who he really was. It's funny, isn't it? How we show people a version of ourselves we think they want to see, hoping they'll love us for it. But what happens when that version is tested? What happens when the mask slips? Thank you for being here with me for this story. If you're enjoying it so far, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this one. I love knowing where you're all watching from, so drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're in. It's amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now let's get back to it. Let's see how this all began and how a man's quiet dignity became his greatest weapon. 2 years earlier, Liam Sterling was, by all outward appearances, exactly what the Vanderbilts thought he was. He was a talented senior architect at a respected, if not globally famous, firm in the city. He lived a life of quiet professionalism. His ambition wasn't loud. It was methodical, expressed in the clean, elegant lines of his designs and the silent accumulation of knowledge. He didn't chase trends. He built foundations. He met Chloe Vanderbilt at a fundraising gala for the city's Contemporary Art Museum. He was there not as a guest, but as a consultant. His firm had been shortlisted to design a new wing for the museum, a project Liam had been passionately pursuing for months. He was standing near a brutalist sculpture, studying its form, when a voice like wind chimes cut through the din of polite chatter. "It's hideous, isn't it?" He turned to see her. Chloe. She was luminous, dressed in a shimmering silver gown that seemed to capture and refract the light of the entire room. Her smile was dazzling, and her eyes held a spark of playful mischief. Liam smiled back, a genuine, unguarded smile. I was thinking it's brutally honest, he replied. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. Concrete, steel, and angles. Her laugh was enchanting. A philosopher architect. I'm intrigued. She extended a hand. Chloe Vanderbilt. Liam Sterling, he said, taking her hand. Her grip was firm, her skin soft. An electric current, small but significant, passed between them. They talked for over an hour, leaning against the cold concrete of the sculpture. He was captivated by her energy, her seeming passion for art and culture, her quick wit. She seemed fascinated by his work, asking intelligent questions about form, function, and the psychology of space. For the first time in a long time, Liam felt seen. He was so engrossed in their conversation that he almost missed his firm's senior partner, motioning him over for an introduction to the museum's board director. I have to go, he said, a note of real regret in his voice. But I'd love to continue this conversation. I'd like that, Chloe said, her smile widening. She pulled a card from her small clutch. I assist the curator at the Gilded Leaf Gallery downtown. Stop by sometime. I'll give you the private tour. Liam took the card. It felt like a promise. That night, he went home feeling a lightness he hadn't felt in years. He had spent the last decade of his life singularly focused on building his empire in the shadows, a silent leviathan moving beneath the surface of the corporate world. His architectural career was his public face, a genuine passion, but also a carefully maintained cover for his true wealth and influence, which he had built through shrewd, anonymous tech investments in property development under a holding company, Sterling Holdings. He had told himself he was too busy for a real relationship, that his complex life was too much to share. But meeting Chloe felt different. It felt possible. A week later, he visited the Gilded Leaf Gallery. Chloe was even more radiant in the daylight. She gave him the promised tour, her commentary sharp and insightful. Afterwards, they went for coffee, and coffee turned into dinner. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Liam found himself breaking his own rigid rules, making time, allowing a space for her to enter his meticulously ordered world. The first crack in the perfect facade appeared a month into their relationship, when he brought her back to his apartment for the first time. It was a spacious one-bedroom in a respectable, but not luxurious building. It was furnished with a designer's eye, clean lines, quality materials, a few pieces of original art, and books. It was comfortable, tasteful, and reflected him perfectly. Chloe walked in and stopped in the center of the living room, her eyes scanning the space with a critical, appraising gaze. Liam watched her, expecting a compliment on the custom-built bookshelves or the vintage Eames chair he'd restored himself. Instead, she turned to him, a small, pitying smile on her lips. "Oh, Liam, this is cute. Very starter." The word stung, a small, sharp prick to his pride. "I like it," he said, his voice neutral. "It's home." "Of course," she said, her tone placating, as if speaking to a child. "But you have so much talent, so much potential. We need to get you into a space that reflects that. Something with a view, a concierge, something that says, 'I've arrived.'" He didn't argue. He simply filed the moment away. It was the first time he realized that for Chloe, a home wasn't a place of comfort. It was a statement. A life wasn't something to be lived. It was something to be displayed. He told himself it was just a difference in perspective, a product of her upbringing. He wanted to believe that her love for him was separate from her love for the things he could potentially provide. He let her take the lead in finding a new apartment a few months later. He had the money to buy a penthouse in the city's most exclusive building 10 times over, but he played his part. He feigned concern over the budget, let her negotiate with a real estate agent for a 2-bedroom rental in a building that was a step up, but still within the believable reach of a successful architect. He paid the exorbitant rent from his personal account, letting her believe it was a stretch for him. He saw the pride in her eyes as she told her friends, "I'm really pushing him to be more ambitious. He just needs the right person to unlock his potential." He was unlocking something, all right, but it wasn't his potential. It was a cold, hard understanding of the woman he was with. He loved the potential of her, the dream of the woman who saw his soul, not his wallet. But every day she gave him more evidence that the dream was just that. And in his black moleskin notebook, in a section he had titled Project Vanderbilt, he made his first entry. It was a simple, factual account of the conversation about his apartment. He didn't know why he was writing it down, not yet. It just felt important, a data point, a piece of evidence in a case he hadn't yet decided to build. The first formal dinner at the Vanderbilt family home was an ordeal Liam would later classify as a masterclass in passive aggression. The house itself was a monument to ostentatious wealth. It was a sprawling, neo-Georgian mansion in the city's most exclusive suburb, filled with furniture that looked more expensive than comfortable. Gold leaf adorned everything, from picture frames to table legs, glittering under the light of oversized crystal chandeliers. It felt less like a home and more like the lobby of a Las Vegas hotel trying to look old. Liam, dressed in a well-tailored but understated navy suit, felt like a crow in a flock of peacocks. Chloe's father, Richard Vanderbilt, greeted him with a handshake that was more of a power squeeze, his eyes scanning Liam's suit with a barely concealed flicker of appraisal. Richard was a man whose confidence was built on a foundation of credit and a carefully curated public image. He had the ruddy complexion of a man who enjoyed expensive scotch and the perpetual air of someone who believed he was the smartest person in any room. Chloe's mother, Eleanor, was even more formidable. A tall, slender woman with a helmet of perfectly coiffed blonde hair, she moved with a regal stiffness, her smile a painted-on grimace that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. Her greeting was a whisper soft, "So nice to finally meet you," that somehow sounded like an accusation. They sat down for dinner in a dining room that could have seated 20. The table was set with a dizzying array of silverware, and the conversation, led by Eleanor and Richard, began almost immediately. It was a performance, and Liam was the unwitting and unwilling subject. "Chloe tells us you're an architect, Liam," Richard began, swirling a deep red wine in his glass. "Fascinating. Building things. I've always been in the business of moving things. Much more lucrative, you'll find. Less dirt under the fingernails." He chuckled, a booming sound that invited everyone to share the joke. Liam smiled politely, refusing to take the bait. "I enjoy the creative process," he said calmly. "Taking an idea and making it a tangible reality is its own reward." Eleanor let out a delicate, tinkling laugh. "Oh, that's so charmingly idealistic. But idealism doesn't pay for a summer in the Hamptons, does it?" She turned to Chloe. "Darling, did you tell Liam about the Carsons' new summer place? Absolutely divine. Their son, you remember him, Bradley? He just made partner at his law firm. Bought it for them outright." The comparison was as subtle as a sledgehammer. Liam felt Chloe shift uncomfortably beside him, but she said nothing. She offered no defense, no attempt to steer the conversation in a different direction. Her silence was a form of complicity, and it was 1,000 times more painful than her parents' overt snobbery. "So what is it you're working on now, Liam?" Richard asked, leaning forward with an expression of feigned interest. "Anything significant?" Liam had just that week anonymously finalized the acquisition of a controlling stake in a revolutionary green technology firm through his holding company. The deal was worth 9 figures and would likely change the future of sustainable energy. He had also just completed the preliminary designs for a state-of-the-art children's hospital he was funding himself, a pro bono project under a pseudonym. "I'm part of the team competing for the new wing of the Contemporary Art Museum," he said, offering them the version of his life he had prepared. "It's a very prestigious project." Richard's face fell. "Ah, a competition. So you don't have it yet. It's more of a Hope. He took a slow sip of his wine. Hope is a fine thing, but it doesn't sign the checks. In my world, we deal in certainties. The rest of the dinner followed the same pattern. Every aspect of Liam's life was weighed, measured, and found wanting. They dissected his education, a state university, not Ivy League, his firm, reputable but not a global Starchitect brand, his family background. His parents were a professor and a librarian, respectable but not wealthy. They did it all with a veneer of polite inquiry, their insults couched in compliments, their condescension wrapped in concern for their daughter's future. Throughout it all, Liam maintained a preternatural calm. He answered their questions with unwavering politeness. He met their condescending smiles with a steady, unreadable gaze. He was a rock against which their waves of snobbery crashed and receded. Inside, however, a cold fire was beginning to burn. He looked at Chloe, hoping for a sign of solidarity, a shared glance, a subtle squeeze of his hand under the table. He received nothing. She was her parents' daughter, nodding along, her expression a careful mask of neutrality. She was embarrassed, not for her parents' boorish behavior, but for him, for his perceived inadequacy. Later that night, as he drove home from dropping Chloe off, the silence in his car was deafening. He had never felt so alone while being in a relationship. He pulled over a few blocks from his apartment, the city lights blurring into a watercolor smear. He took out his black moleskin notebook. He flipped to the Project Vanderbilt section. Under the first entry, he began to write. He documented the entire evening, not his feelings, but the facts, the questions they asked, the exact phrasing of their insults. Richard's comment about dirt under the fingernails, Eleanor's story about Bradley Carson. He recorded Chloe's silence, her lack of defense. He wrote with the dispassionate precision of an anthropologist documenting the rituals of a strange and hostile tribe. When he was done, he sat for a long time, the book open on his lap. He felt the weight of it, not just the paper and leather, but the weight of the information it contained. He was building a case. He was collecting evidence. He still didn't know what the verdict would be or who the judge was, but he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that there would be a trial. And as he put the car in gear and drove the rest of the way home, he felt a subtle shift within himself. The architect, the builder, was now also becoming the demolitions expert. He was learning the precise stress points and structural weaknesses of the life he was pretending to build, and of the family that was trying so desperately to tear it down. The wedding planning was the next battlefield, and it was there that Chloe's allegiance became devastatingly clear. For Liam, a wedding was a declaration of love and commitment. For Chloe and the Vanderbilts, it was a strategic social event, a theatrical production designed to project status and wealth. Every decision became a skirmish in a war he hadn't known he was fighting. "We can't possibly have the reception at the Grove," Eleanor declared one afternoon, swatting away Liam's suggestion as if it were a fly. They were gathered in the Vanderbilt's sunroom, a space so white and sterile it felt like an operating theater. Piles of glossy bridal magazines lay on the glass coffee table like surgical instruments. "It's a beautiful venue, Eleanor," Liam said calmly. "The gardens are stunning, and their farm-to-table menu is the best in the state." He had also, 3 years prior, been the lead architect on its award-winning renovation, a fact he kept to himself. "It's quaint," Eleanor conceded, the word dripping with disdain. "It's where people have lovely little middle-class weddings. Chloe is a Vanderbilt. The wedding needs to reflect that. We're thinking the grand ballroom at the Astoria." The Astoria was the most expensive venue in the city, known for its ostentatious gold and crystal decor and its eye-watering price per head. It was the opposite of everything Liam valued in design and in life. "The Astoria is a bit much, isn't it?" Liam ventured, looking at Chloe for support. "And frankly, the cost is astronomical." Chloe, who had been flipping through a magazine, looked up with an air of practiced exasperation. "Liam, please don't start with the budget again. It's so tiresome. My parents are helping. Your parents are not helping, Liam countered, keeping his voice even. They're offering to contribute a fraction of the cost for a wedding that is 10 times more expensive than what we originally discussed. The majority of this will still fall to us, to me. Richard, who had been silent, set down his newspaper. Son, he said, the word a condescending pat on the head. You have to understand, this isn't just a party, it's an investment in your future. The people who will be at this wedding, they're the people you need to know. It's about building a network. You have to spend money to make money. I'm more interested in building a marriage than a network, Liam said, the words quieter than he intended. It was then that Chloe turned on him. And you think penny pinching on our wedding is the way to do that? She snapped, her voice sharp. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have to tell my friends that my fiancé is worried about the cost of canapés? You're a successful architect. Start acting like it. Honestly, sometimes I think you're scared of success. You're so comfortable in your little safe world that you're afraid to step up to the next level. Her words hit him like a physical blow. Scared of success. He, a man who had built $1 billion portfolio from nothing before the age of 35. He, who moved markets with anonymous trades and shaped the city's skyline with secret developments. He was being called unambitious by a woman whose greatest accomplishment was her follower count on Instagram. He didn't argue. He simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. You're right, he said, the taste of metal in his mouth. We should have the wedding you want. The capitulation pleased them. Eleanor immediately got on the phone with the wedding planner. Richard went back to his paper, satisfied that he had dispensed his worldly wisdom. Chloe gave Liam a triumphant little smile, as if she had successfully trained a stubborn pet. She saw his agreement as a victory for her vision. She couldn't see that it was a surrender of a different kind, a surrender of his hope for their relationship. That evening, he went back to the apartment they now shared, the one she had decorated to be a showroom of her taste. He went into his home office, a small room she rarely entered, calling it his tinkering space. He closed the door and made a call. Marcus, he said, his voice stripped of the day's weariness, now sharp and authoritative. Liam, everything all right? Marcus Thorne's voice was calm and steady on the other end of the line. Marcus was more than Liam's financial manager. He was the public face and iron-fisted executor of Sterling Holdings, the friend and partner who knew the truth of Liam's dual life. Everything is proceeding as expected, Liam said, his eyes scanning a spreadsheet on his monitor that detailed the labyrinthine finances of the Vanderbilt import-export business. He had commissioned a full, discreet audit weeks ago. I need you to prepare the secondary accounts for a significant liquidation. We're going to need liquid funds, a lot of them. Is this for the wedding? Marcus asked, a note of concern in his voice. He was the only person who knew the full extent of the Vanderbilt's disdain for Liam. The wedding is the catalyst, not the cause, Liam replied cryptically. Just have the funds ready to move on my signal. And Marcus, I want you to start drawing up the paperwork for the Vanderbilt credit lines. All of them. I want to know our exact position should we choose to call in their debt. There was a pause on the other end. Liam, Marcus said, his voice low, this is escalating. I know, Liam said, looking at his reflection in the dark computer screen. I'm just preparing for all eventualities. He hung up the phone and opened his black notebook. He turned to a new page in the Project Vanderbilt section. He wrote down the date, the venue they had chosen, the estimated cost. Then he wrote Chloe's words verbatim. You're scared of success. You're so comfortable in your little, safe world. He underlined the sentence twice. It was no longer just an insult. It was a prophecy. He was about to step out of his safe world, and he was certain they were not going to like the man they found waiting on the other side. The final humiliation occurred, fittingly, at the Vanderbilt's natural habitat, the Oak Ridge Country Club. It was a place steeped in generations of unearned privilege, a bastion of quiet snobbery where last names were more important than character. The event was a pre-wedding cocktail party hosted by Eleanor and Richard, ostensibly to introduce Liam to their wider social circle. In reality, it was an opportunity for him to be paraded and judged by a jury of his supposed peers. Liam stood on the terrace overlooking the perfectly manicured golf course, a glass of sparkling water in his hand. Chloe was flitting from group to group, a social butterfly in her element, accepting congratulations and basking in the attention. She had made a cursory effort to introduce him to a few people, but had quickly abandoned him to mingle with her own friends, leaving him adrift in a sea of pastel-colored linen and quiet judgment. It wasn't long before a small group of Chloe's friends, two women named Tiffany and Brooke, and their smug-looking husbands, cornered him near the balustrade. "Liam, right?" Tiffany began, her smile a little too wide. "Chloe has told us so much about you." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Liam said, his own smile polite and practiced. "So, you're an architect," Brooke chirped. "That's so creative. Do you build, like, houses?" "Sometimes," Liam replied. "My firm focuses more on commercial and civic projects." "Right," one of the husbands, a hedge fund manager named Chad, interjected. "That museum thing," Chloe mentioned it. "Tough break, losing out on that. The Henderson Group is a monster, hard to compete with that." The news that his firm had lost the museum bid was not yet public. It was a piece of information that Chloe must have shared with them, another example of his professional shortcomings to be gossiped about among her friends. The truth was, Liam's holding company had acquired a majority share in the Henderson Group 6 months ago, and he had personally made the decision to award the project to his smaller, public-facing firm's chief competitor to maintain his cover and avoid a conflict of interest. The loss was a strategic victory he couldn't share. "It was a competitive process," Liam said evenly. "Still," Chad pressed, a predatory glint in his eye, "gotta be tough on the old bank account. Architecture isn't exactly a cash cow, is it? What's a senior guy at a firm like yours pull in? 200? 250? The question was so brazen, so crass, that Liam was momentarily stunned. They were asking for his salary at a cocktail party. Before he could answer, Chloe glided over, a fresh glass of champagne in her hand. "What are you guys talking about?" she asked, looping her arm through Liam's. "Just getting to know your man here," Chad said with a smirk. "Talking shop." Chloe laughed, a light, airy sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, don't bore him with work talk. Liam hates talking about money. He finds it so uncouth." She gave his arm a little squeeze, a gesture that was meant to look affectionate but felt like a warning. The message was clear. "Don't embarrass me." Her friends laughed along with her, and Liam was once again the butt of a joke he was expected to endure with a smile. He felt a familiar coldness settle in his chest. It wasn't just them, it was her. She was the ringleader, using his feigned modesty as a source of amusement for her friends, reinforcing their narrative of him as a man of limited means and even more limited ambition. Later, as the party began to wind down, Richard Vanderbilt pulled him aside, steering him toward a quiet corner of the terrace. He placed a heavy hand on Liam's shoulder, his expression one of grave, paternal concern. "Liam, we need to have a little chat, man to man," Richard began, his voice low. "I'm happy for you and Chloe, I am. But I have to be honest, son. I'm worried." "Worried about what, Richard?" Liam asked, his posture relaxed, his gaze steady. "I'm worried about you. I see a good man, a smart man, but I don't see a provider. Not the kind of provider a woman like Chloe needs, and deserves." He gestured vaguely at the opulent surroundings. "This life, it doesn't run on creative processes and prestigious projects. It runs on cold, hard cash. Chloe is used to a certain standard. I won't have her standard of living decline because her husband is, well, let's be frank, because he's not in the right league." The sheer audacity of the man was breathtaking. Richard's company was leveraged to the hilt, a house of cards waiting for a stiff breeze. a fact Liam knew from the detailed financial report sitting in his briefcase. And here he was, dispensing advice on wealth. "You're going to be my son-in-law," Richard continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. "That means you reflect on me, on this family. I need you to step up, be more aggressive, take more risks, go after the big money. Whatever you're doing now, it's not enough. You need to do better. For her." Liam looked past Richard's florid face to the setting sun, which was painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. A beautiful, tranquil end to an ugly day. He thought about the children's hospital he was building, the clean energy firm he was funding, the scholarships he had endowed at his alma mater. All of it done in secret, all of it meaningless to this man, to this family. Their world was so small, their vision so narrow, that they couldn't see anything beyond the glint of a Rolex or the logo on a car. He turned his gaze back to Richard. He gave him a slow, deliberate nod. "Thank you for your honesty, Richard," he said, his voice a perfect imitation of humble gratitude. "You've given me a lot to think about." "Good man," Richard said, clapping him on the shoulder again, satisfied. "I knew you'd see sense." As he walked away, Liam slipped his hand into his jacket pocket, his fingers brushing against the smooth cover of his moleskin. He didn't need to write anything down this time. The words were burned into his memory. "It's not enough. You need to do better." He had made his decision. The time for observation was over. The time for action was at hand. He would do better, but not in the way Richard Vanderbilt could ever comprehend. He would give them exactly what they deserved. The stage was now set for the final act. Liam spent the next week meticulously putting the pieces into place. The lie about losing the waterfront project in his job was the opening salvo. He had his own public relations team, a small, elite firm he kept on retainer for Sterling Holdings, plant the story in a minor industry blog, just credible enough to be believable if someone were to do a cursory search. It was a ghost story designed to haunt his public persona for a few days before vanishing. He chose the day to tell Chloe with care. It was a Tuesday, the day after her mother had called to finalize the deposit on the obscenely expensive Astoria ballroom, a deposit Liam was expected to pay. He let the call go to voicemail. When he told Chloe the news of his fabricated financial ruin, her reaction was everything he had expected, and yet it still managed to wound him with its sheer, unadulterated selfishness. Her immediate move to pack her bags, her venomous parting words, they were the final confirmation, the irrefutable proof he needed to proceed without a shred of guilt. After she left, the silence in the apartment was a balm. He felt the tension of the last 2 years begin to drain out of him, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. He had spent so long playing a part, contorting himself into a smaller, less threatening version of himself, that standing in his own truth felt like taking a deep breath after being underwater for too long. He let a day pass. He did not call her. He did not text. He knew the Vanderbilt family machinery would be churning. Eleanor would be in damage control mode, managing the social fallout. Richard would be calculating his own exposure. And Chloe would be fortifying her position, justifying her actions, painting him as the villain in the story she was already constructing for her friends. On the second day, he made his move. He sent a single, simple text message to Chloe. "I know this is difficult, but I believe we owe it to each other and to your parents to have one final conversation, to discuss the future in a civilized way. Please come to the apartment for dinner tomorrow night. Bring your parents. I will explain everything." He knew they would interpret the message through the lens of their own arrogance. They would see it as the desperate plea of a broken man, a final, pathetic attempt to beg for forgiveness or assistance. They would come not for civility, but for the satisfaction of delivering the final nail in his coffin. They would come to gloom, to lecture, and to formally sever all ties. He then sent a second text, this one to Marcus Thorne. "The dinner is tomorrow at 8. "Bring the portfolios. Time to close the account." The reply was instantaneous. "Acknowledged. See you at 8." Liam spent the next 24 hours in a state of quiet, focused preparation. He didn't order catering, he cooked himself. It was a simple, elegant meal: seared scallops, roasted lamb, a rich chocolate torte for dessert. Cooking had always been a form of meditation for him, a way to impose order and create something good from disparate elements. As he chopped vegetables and reduced a sauce, he felt a profound sense of calm. The storm was coming, but he was in the eye of it, still, uncertain. He set the table for 4. He used the simple, elegant dinnerware he owned, not the gaudy, gold-rimmed plates Chloe had insisted they register for. He chose a modest but excellent wine. Everything was designed to reinforce their perception of him, a man of simple tastes, now brought low by his own foolishness. At 7:30 he showered and dressed. He didn't put on a suit. He chose a pair of dark, well-fitted trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a simple, dark gray cashmere sweater. He was comfortable, relaxed, the host of a dinner party, not a man on trial. He stood by the window, looking out at the glittering cityscape. This view, the one Chloe had claimed as her own, was from a building he had developed and now owned. The apartment they were in was one of 30 such units he kept for corporate partners and personal use. These were the simple, staggering facts of his life, the truths he had hidden behind a curtain of mediocrity. And tonight he was going to pull that curtain back. At precisely 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Liam took one last, deep breath. He walked to the door, his footsteps silent on the polished hardwood floor. He smoothed the front of his sweater, a gesture of calm. He opened the door. There they stood. Richard, his face a mask of stern disapproval. Eleanor, her posture rigid with disdain, her eyes sweeping the room for evidence of his downfall. And Chloe. She stood slightly behind them, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of contempt and boredom. She was already mentally 1,000 miles away from him, from this apartment, from the life she was so eager to discard. "Richard, Eleanor, Chloe," Liam said, his voice warm and welcoming, utterly devoid of the desperation they expected. "Thank you for coming. Please, come in." Their surprise at his composure was visible, a brief flicker of confusion in their eyes before they rearranged their features back into masks of condescension. They walked in, bringing a chill with them. The quiet before the storm was over. The storm had just walked through his door. They sat at the dining table in a strained, heavy silence. Liam served the first course, the seared scallops, moving with an unhurried grace that seemed to further unsettle his guests. They had come expecting a groveling, broken man. They found a serene host, seemingly untroubled by his own ruin. Richard was the first to break the silence, pushing his plate away after a single bite. "Liam, let's dispense with the pleasantries. We're not here for a social call. We're here to end this situation." Eleanor dabbed her lips with a napkin, though she hadn't eaten. "Richard is right. This entire engagement has been a regrettable mistake. We're here to ensure the disengagement is handled as cleanly and quietly as possible." Liam looked at Chloe. She refused to meet his gaze, focusing instead on a microscopic scratch on her wineglass. Her silence was her assent. "A mistake," Liam repeated softly, letting the words settle in the air. He leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed, his hands resting on the table. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about mistakes for the past 2 years, about choices, about value." "Spare us the philosophical ramblings," Chloe said, her voice sharp and brittle. "Just tell us what you want. Are you going to contest the annulment? Are you expecting some kind of settlement? Because after your catastrophic financial incompetence, I can assure you there's nothing left to settle." It was the opening he had been waiting for. "I want nothing from you, Chloe," he said, his voice so calm it was chilling. "In fact, I'm here tonight to give you something. All of you." He paused, letting them absorb that. "I'm here to give you the truth. He reached down beside his chair and lifted his worn, black moleskin notebook, placing it on the table with a soft thud. The three of them glanced at it with disinterest. It was just another symbol of his quaint, unimpressive life. "This is a ledger of sorts," Liam began, opening the book. "I started it the day Chloe called my first apartment cute and starter. I've made an entry for every slight, every insult, every moment of condescension, a comprehensive record of my perceived inadequacies." Richard scoffed. "What is this? Some kind of pathetic little diary? You're going to read us your hurt feelings?" "Not my feelings," Liam corrected him gently. "Just the facts. For instance, on April 14th at your home, Richard, you informed me that building things was less lucrative than moving things and involved dirt under the fingernails. On the same evening, Eleanor, you unfavorably compared my career prospects to those of Bradley Carson, who had just bought his parents a house in the Hamptons." He looked at Chloe. "On June 22nd, during a discussion about our wedding, you told me I was scared of success and too comfortable in my little, safe world because I expressed concern over a budget you knew was beyond my apparent means." He flipped a page. "And on August 29th at the country club, you laughed with your friends as they mocked my profession, and then you left me to be lectured by your father on the need to step up and get in the right league." He listed a dozen more instances, his voice a calm, even monotone. He recounted every dismissive comment, every backhanded compliment, every public humiliation. With each sentence, the atmosphere in the room grew colder, more tense. The Vanderbilts' expressions shifted from arrogance to discomfort, then to a dawning anger. "What is the point of this, Liam?" Eleanor finally snapped, her voice tight. "To shame us? To paint yourself as a victim?" "No," Liam said, closing the notebook. "Not to shame you. To establish a baseline. To show you the man you thought I was. The small, unambitious, middle-class architect you tolerated, embarrassed by, and planned to discard the moment he became inconvenient." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto each of them in turn. "Now, allow me to introduce you to the man I actually am." He began with the lies they believed. "The waterfront project. I didn't lose it. My firm never had it. The bid was won by the Henderson Group." He paused. "I own the Henderson Group. I have for 6 months. I made the decision to award the project to a competitor of my public-facing firm to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest." The air crackled. Richard's jaw went slack. "My job," Liam continued, his voice steady. "I wasn't fired. It's difficult to be fired from a company you secretly own. I founded my firm, Apex Architecture, under a different name 10 years ago. I sold it to a larger conglomerate 2 years ago for a sum that would make your head spin, with a contractual clause that allowed me to remain as a senior architect, a public face, for as long as I wished. I enjoy the work, the dirt under the fingernails." He met Richard's stunned gaze. He turned to Chloe. "This apartment, the one you found so underwhelmingly starter when we moved in, I didn't rent it, I own the building, and the 3 adjacent to it. My holding company, Sterling Holdings, is one of the largest private real estate developers in this city. The view you were so proud of showing your friends, you were looking at a skyline that I helped build." Chloe's face had gone ghost white. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "The Gilded Leaf Gallery," he went on, his voice relentless, "where you work as an assistant curator. A charming hobby. The gallery was on the verge of bankruptcy 3 years ago. It was saved by a single, anonymous benefactor who not only cleared its debts, but provided a perpetual endowment. That benefactor was me. Your salary, your title, the very existence of your job, you owe them to the man you just called a sentimental idiot." Eleanor made a small, strangled sound in the back of her throat. Liam saved the final, most devastating revelation for Richard. "And you, Richard," he said, his voice dropping to an almost gentle tone. "You, who lectured me on the need to get in the right league. Your import-export business is a proud, family-run institution. It is also leveraged to an astonishing degree. Your primary lender, the bank that holds the notes on your warehouses, your shipping fleet, your entire operation, is a private investment bank called Northgate Financial. Richard's face, which had been pale, now turned a ghastly shade of gray. He looked like he was going to be sick. I founded Northgate Financial 5 years ago as a vehicle for my larger corporate investments, Liam said, delivering the quiet bomb. So you see, Richard, for the past 2 years, while you were judging my suits and questioning my earning potential, your entire financial existence has been in my hands. Every loan, every line of credit, every asset you claim as your own exists only because I allow it to. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the frantic, panicked breathing of Richard Vanderbilt. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been annihilated. The arrogant elite, so secure in their castle of wealth and status, had just discovered that the quiet man they had been mocking in the courtyard was not a peasant. He was the king, and he owned the land their castle was built on. The aftermath was a symphony of shattered arrogance. For a long moment, nobody moved. They were frozen, caught in the blinding glare of a truth so absolute it was disorienting. Richard Vanderbilt, a man defined by his blustering self-assurance, looked utterly broken. His face was slick with a sudden sweat, his eyes wide with a terror that was primal. He stared at Liam, not as a prospective son-in-law, but as a man staring at his executioner. Eleanor was the first to find her voice, though it was a thin, reedy thing, stripped of its usual imperious tone. I don't believe you, she stammered, but her words lacked any conviction. It was the desperate denial of a mind refusing to accept a catastrophic reality. You're lying. This is some kind of sick, elaborate revenge. Liam didn't even grace her with a direct response. At that exact moment, as if choreographed, the doorbell rang again. Liam stood and walked to the door. He opened it to reveal Marcus Thorne. Marcus was the physical embodiment of quiet power. Dressed in a flawlessly tailored charcoal suit, with silver hair and a gaze as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, he carried a slim leather portfolio. "Marcus, you're right on time," Liam said, stepping aside to let him in. "Liam," Marcus acknowledged with a nod. He stepped into the room, his presence immediately commanding the space. He gave the three Vanderbilts a brief, dismissive glance, his eyes lingering for a fraction of a second on Richard's terrified face. "Everything is in order." "Excellent," Liam said. He turned back to the family huddled at his dining table. "This is my associate, Marcus Thorne. He is the CEO of Sterling Holdings and the acting president of Northgate Financial. He has brought some light reading for you, Richard." Marcus stepped forward and placed the leather portfolio on the table in front of Richard. He didn't open it. The simple act of placing it there was enough. It was a bomb waiting to be detonated. "Inside that portfolio, Richard," Liam explained calmly, "you will find copies of your company's debt agreements, all of which have been legally acquired by Northgate. You'll notice that many of them contain covenant clauses related to financial solvency and material changes in management, clauses you are, as of today, in breach of. Marcus also has the paperwork prepared to call in those debts, all of them, effective immediately." Richard stared at the portfolio as if it were a venomous snake. He didn't touch it. It was Chloe who finally broke. The shock had receded, replaced by a frantic, desperate scramble for survival. Her face, which had been a mask of disbelief, suddenly crumpled into a caricature of remorse. Tears, real or fabricated, welled in her eyes. "Liam, baby," she whispered, standing up and taking a hesitant step toward him. I didn't know. My God, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me?" Liam looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Tell you what, Chloe? That I was wealthy? Why would that have mattered? I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for what I had. A test you failed more spectacularly than I could have ever imagined." "No!" she cried, reaching for his arm. He stepped back just out of her reach. "It wasn't like that. I was just scared. I was scared for us. I love you, Liam. I've always loved you. The money, it doesn't matter. It never mattered." The hypocrisy was so profound, so utterly shameless, that Liam almost laughed. "It never mattered?" he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. He used his own weapon, the moral mirror, turning her own words back on her. "An hour ago, you stood in this very room and told me I was a failure, a waste of your time. You packed your bags and walked out of my life because you thought the money was gone. Now you stand here, telling me it doesn't matter, only because you've discovered there's more of it than you could ever dream of. Do you hear yourself? Do you have any idea how hollow you sound?" Her face fell. The tears stopped as she realized her pleas were having no effect. Her desperation began to curdle into resentment. "So what is this?" she spat, her voice turning ugly again. "You were playing with me? For 2 years? You let my family and I believe you were nothing, just so you could enjoy this little moment of triumph? That's sick, Liam. It's cruel." "Cruel?" Liam asked, his voice rising for the first time, not in anger, but in sheer disbelief. "You want to talk about cruel? Cruel is slowly chipping away at the self-worth of the person who loves you. Cruel is standing by silently while your family belittles him. Cruel is abandoning him at the first sign of trouble. That isn't a game, Chloe. That is a revelation of character. My test didn't change who you are, it just showed me." He turned his attention back to Richard, who was now being spoken to in low, ominous tones by Marcus. Eleanor was watching the exchange, her hand pressed to her mouth in horror. "I'm not going to call in your debts, Richard," Liam said. The statement was so unexpected that Richard looked up, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. "I'm not a monster. I don't destroy lives for sport." He let the hope hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "Instead, I am exercising my right as the primary shareholder to restructure the management of your company. As of tomorrow morning, you are retired. You will be given a generous pension, but you will have no further operational control. Marcus will be appointing a new CEO, someone with integrity and vision, to salvage the company you nearly ran into the ground." He then looked at Eleanor. "The house, the cars, the country club membership, they are all corporate assets. The new management will be reviewing all expenditures. I would advise you to prepare for a significant adjustment in your lifestyle." The sentence was a death blow to their social standing, more devastating than simple bankruptcy. He wasn't taking their money, he was taking their status. He was dismantling the entire edifice of their lives, brick by gilded brick. Finally, he looked back at Chloe. Her face was a ruin. The beautiful, confident woman was gone, replaced by a desperate stranger. "Liam, please," she begged, her voice a hoarse whisper. "We can fix this. I can change. I can be the person you want." "The person I wanted was the one I thought I met 2 years ago," he said, his voice now gentle, almost sad. "A woman who was smart and funny and who loved art for its honesty, not its price tag. I have no idea if that woman ever really existed, but I know for certain she isn't here in this room tonight." He walked to the front door and opened it. "Marcus will see you out. He has all the necessary paperwork for you to sign, Richard. I suggest you cooperate." He looked at Chloe one last time. "Goodbye, Chloe." He didn't wait for a reply. He turned and walked back toward the window, presenting his back to them, just as he had done when he first delivered his lie. But this time, it was not a posture of shame. It was a posture of finality. He heard their hushed, frantic whispers, the rustle of papers, and finally the sound of the front door closing. And then, for the second time in as many days, he was alone. But this time, the silence was not just a balm, it was a victory. The months that followed were a study in consequences. Liam did not wield his power like a cudgel. He simply removed the scaffolding of his support, and allowed the hollow structures of the Vanderbilts' lives to collapse under their own weight. Richard Vanderbilt was true to his word and retired. The news was spun as a graceful, voluntary handover to a new generation of leadership. But within their small, gossipy social circle, the truth, or a version of it, began to leak out. The Vanderbilts were no longer seen at the galas and charity balls. The invitations simply stopped coming. Without the corporate expense account, Eleanor found their lifestyle unsustainable. The Neo-Georgian mansion was quietly put on the market, and they downsized to a modest condominium, a place Eleanor described to her few remaining friends as a charming pied-à-terre. The humiliation was exquisite in its subtlety. They hadn't lost everything, but they had lost what mattered most to them, their standing. Chloe's downfall was more personal and more public. Her job at the gallery, which Liam now fully owned, was terminated. The official reason was restructuring, but the message was clear. Without the Vanderbilt name and its associated, and now defunct, influence, she found the doors that had once opened so easily were now firmly shut. Her social media presence, once a vibrant tapestry of luxury travel, exclusive parties, and designer clothes, withered. Her posts became infrequent, her tone tinged with a bitterness she couldn't quite conceal. Her followers, drawn to the fantasy she projected, quickly lost interest in the mundane reality. She had built her identity on a foundation of appearances, and when the appearances faded, there was nothing left. Liam heard through Marcus that she had tried to rebrand herself, to launch a lifestyle blog about authentic living, but the irony was too rich, and it failed to gain traction. The last he heard, she was working in retail, a job she would have once openly scorned, living a life of quiet anonymity. He felt no pleasure in her struggle, only a distant, clinical pity. She was a victim of a value system she had embraced with all her heart, a system that had ultimately devoured her. Liam, meanwhile, stepped out of the shadows, not with a grand announcement, but gradually, organically. He took a more public role at Sterling Holdings. The architect Liam Sterling, once known for his quiet competence, was slowly revealed to be the visionary billionaire Liam Sterling. The business world was fascinated by the story of the man who had hidden in plain sight. He gave a few, select interviews, not to brag about his wealth, but to talk about his philosophy, that true value lies in creation, not consumption, that integrity is the only asset that can't be devalued. His life became fuller, more authentic. He no longer had to bifurcate his existence into the public architect and the private tycoon. He was simply Liam. He poured his energy into the projects that mattered to him: sustainable urban development, educational charities, and the Children's Hospital, which was completed and opened its doors to its first patients. He was there for the ribbon cutting, not as an anonymous benefactor, but as its founder. Seeing the faces of the children and their families, the gratitude in the eyes of the doctors and nurses, that, he realized, was the kind of wealth Richard Vanderbilt could never comprehend. One evening, about a year after the dinner, he was at a charity event for the hospital. He was no longer lurking by the sculptures. He was the host, moving through the crowd with an easy confidence. He was talking to a pediatric surgeon when he felt a light touch on his arm. He turned and saw a woman with warm, intelligent eyes and a smile that was genuine and completely unguarded. She was a doctor at the hospital, an oncologist he had met during the planning stages. "I just wanted to say thank you again, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice sincere. "What you've built here, it's more than a building, it's hope." "Please call me Liam," he said, smiling back. "And the thanks belong to you and your team. You're the ones doing the real work." They talked for a long time, not about money or status, but about medicine, about helping people, about the small, profound moments that give a life meaning. Her name was Dr. Eris Thorne, and he was struck by her passion, her intelligence, and her complete lack of artifice. She wasn't impressed by his wealth. She was impressed by his actions. As the evening ended, he walked with her to the door. "I'd love to continue this conversation, Dr. Thorne," he said. "Heiress," she corrected him with a smile. "And I'd like that very much, Liam." He watched her go, a sense of quiet optimism blooming in his chest. It was a feeling he hadn't had in a long time. It was the possibility of a genuine connection, built not on a facade, but on a shared foundation of values. Later that night, back in his real home, a stunning but warm penthouse apartment that was a true reflection of his own taste, he found the black moleskin notebook while unpacking an old box. He hadn't looked at it in a year. He flipped through the pages, the cold, factual record of a life he no longer lived, and a man he no longer had to be. He read the entries, the catalog of insults and slights, and he felt nothing. No anger, no resentment, only a profound sense of distance. He walked to the fireplace, the notebook in his hand. For a moment, he considered tossing it into the flames, a final, symbolic act of release. But he stopped. The book wasn't a record of his pain. It was a record of his clarity. It was a reminder that character isn't what you show to the world when times are good. It's what is revealed when you're tested. It was a reminder that true strength isn't about projecting power, but about having the integrity to know your own worth, even when others refuse to see it. He placed the notebook on the shelf in his library, a quiet monument to a difficult lesson learned. He had set a fire to test the gold, and in the ashes, he had found not only their true nature, but his own. He had lost a fiancée, but he had regained himself. And in the end, it was the most profitable exchange he had ever made. And so, we come to the end of Liam's story. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that true wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts or social status. It's about integrity, character, and the courage to be true to yourself, even when you're surrounded by people who want you to be someone else. Liam's story shows us that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to hold up a mirror and let people see themselves for who they truly are. The consequences are their own to bear. What do you think? Was Liam justified in his actions? Or was his test a form of cruelty in itself? I would love to read your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. It's through these conversations that we can all learn and grow. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. If this story resonated with you, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more stories of justice, redemption, and the power of the human spirit. Your support means the world and allows me to keep bringing these narratives to you. Until next time, be kind, be strong, and never let anyone else define your worth.